Let's get started. Ms. Brown, it's great to see you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're very pleased to be joined by Denise Brown, who, as you know, is the Humanitarian Coordinator for Ukraine. She's joining us virtually to give an update on the humanitarian situation in the country. And I'll turn over the floor to you right now. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. So apologies for not joining you last week. We actually got stuck on the road between Mykolaiv and but I spent a few days last week in Odessa, and then I went on to...
Hold on. Sorry, the audio's dropping in and out. 1 second. Okay, I think we got it now. Please start over again. Nope. Hold on. Hold on. Stop one more time. Give me a signal when you have the audio. Yep. All right. Try one more time. Sorry about that. No.
Can you hear me this time?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes. Yeah, great.
Very good. All right. So I went to Odessa last week for a couple of days and then on to Mykolaiv. I went to Odessa for three very specific reasons. One was to check on our staff, and I'll say more about that in a moment. The second was to visit the cathedral that had been attacked. And the third was to visit the port, which had also been attacked. So Odessa is a very important hub for the UN and the humanitarian community in general, but we have on the UN side about 80 of our staff there. And Odessa has actually been hugely important to us over the past year that I've been here because it serves as a staging area for our response initially in Mykolaiv. And then when that front line in Mykolaiv moved back, do you remember last November? Then we had to do a lot in Kherson, and the front line remains very, very close to Kherson. So Kherson continues to be one of our geographical areas of focus. And most of that assistance comes through Odessa. So we have a lot of staff there. It's a very important staging area for us. There were several attacks on Odessa in the past couple of weeks, which was quite a change in the situation. But it was really the attack on the cathedral, which is in the center of the city, a protected part of the city, and in terms of cultural heritage, and therefore within several hundred meters of where most of our staff live and where our office is. So a lot of very shaken up UN staff. Needed some support, and so I was really down there to speak to them. The second very important part of my visit was going to the cathedral, which I did. I was able to visit inside the cathedral, every single floor of the cathedral. One part of it is really completely damaged, and I'm not a damage or bomb expert, but it was completely damaged. One particular wing of the cathedral, but of course that blast causing a huge amount of damage throughout the cathedral. I think really what very important information that I learned when I was there is that because the air siren had gone off and because the cathedral does have a bunker, there were a number of people from the neighborhood who'd taken shelter in the bunker, of course, not realizing how could they that the cathedral was going to be hit. You've seen in social media that UNESCO has sent in a team of experts. They arrived there over the weekend. I don't have any information yet on what they're finding, but they're looking very closely at the damage, and they will come away with an assessment of the damage. It was also very heartening to see that even when I was there 24 hours later, much of the community, much of the city had come together around the cathedral to clean up the huge amount of damage caused by broken glass. And there was an incredible effort underway by the people of Odessa. I also visited the port. I've been in the port many, many times since I've been here over the past 1 year. There is damage to the port. I'm not reporting on the damage to the port. That's critical civilian infrastructure, but it is civilian infrastructure. That's the important point. Whether it's the cathedral or the port, this is civilian infrastructure used for civilians and civilian purposes. And in the port, the workers are civilian. And of course, this comes just after the Russian termination of the Black Sea Initiative. And I said it last week, and I'll repeat it, that port is a lifeline on both sides. It's a lifeline to hungry people across the world, and it is a lifeline for the farmers of Ukraine. But I did comment on the port last week. Mykolaiv was similar in that I visited the block which had been attacked last week, and again, it is civilian infrastructure. These are apartment blocks that were hit, and some of it so badly damaged it's just going to have to be completely pulled down. That was clear to anyone, and other parts that are badly damaged but can be repaired. I think the important point here, Farhan, is that what we're seeing is being repeated. What I saw in Mykolaiv, what I saw in Odessa last week with my own eyes, is being repeated across many big cities in Ukraine. This morning, again, in Kryvyi Rih, an apartment building was hit. People have been killed, are still under the rubble. I have also issued a statement about that. Over the weekend, again, in Dnipro, it's constant in Kherson, and also over the weekend in Kharkiv. So just a regular targeting of these big cities. We are present in almost all of these places, and if we're not physically present, we're very close by, just down the road. So whether it's Dnipro or Kryvyi Rih this morning, the UN agencies, the NGOs, local volunteers continue to respond, of course, with immediate support, which is shelter, but a lot of times it's also more and more that psychosocial support. So what this means is that the needs of the population are increasing; they are not decreasing. Our humanitarian response plan is only 30% funded. It's almost 1st of August, but it gets cold very early in Ukraine, and you've heard me talk in the past about the winterization. We're already starting to prepare for this. We have thousands and thousands of damaged houses, apartment blocks, since last winter, right? So this is additional damage on top of what we had to deal with last winter. We also continue our frontline deliveries several times a week to all of the frontline oblasts, including in Sumy, where we were last week, which has now become an active frontline. And of course, continuing all of our regular humanitarian support, while in parallel trying to support the recovery efforts and rebuilding communities where that's possible. I'll stop there and back to you, Farhan.
Ms. Brown.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ms. Brown, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you very much for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of follow-ups on what you just said. First, you said the humanitarian appeal is only 30% funded. What's the appeal for, and why do you think that the funding is so low? And secondly, could you give us a broader picture of what the humanitarian situation is like as we're now almost or close to a year and a half into the war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Farhan, would you like me to go ahead right away?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. Sorry, there's a lag. So the humanitarian we have a humanitarian response plan, which is a document based on needs overview, which covers the calendar year. So the one I'm referring to is for 2023, and it's for $3.9 billion to cover all the humanitarian needs in the country. I've done, I think 2 weeks ago, it was a donor briefing for Geneva. I was online just to signal that, with what we've received, we're able to respond to the needs now, but the Kakhovka Dam, which was totally unexpected, and the needs from that and the rebuilding from that's going to have to take place. The particular problem of access to drinkable water and the irrigation aspects for agricultural land, all entirely unexpected. So my message to the donors was thank you very much for the outstanding support we've received, and we really need, and the Ukrainians are counting on that support continuing. As I've said, our frontline deliveries continue. We need to absolutely prepare for the winter months like we did last year. We have unexpected things like the Kakhovka Dam, like these cities being attacked, for which we need to respond. So I'm hopeful that what sounds like a low percentage, 30, is going to change in the coming months. But honestly, the humanitarian situation hasn't changed. The war continues and intensifies. And as that war continues, and people remain displaced, and people live in communities where they're afraid, and they leave or they stay and they look for that support. It's a continuation of the dramatic situation that I have spoken to you about on a number of occasions. And the only thing that's going to relieve that situation is if the war stops. So, yeah, nothing has changed. People in need. I think the only thing I would say, which is also growing at a fast pace, I think, is the trauma caused by the war, is something we see over and over and over again.
Okay.
Back to you.
Thank you. Zhu Deji?
Hi, Ms. Brown. This is Xu Dezhi with China Central Television. Just one quick question. We saw the attacks from Russia on the port and downtown Odessa. How's the damage? Would the damage really affect the restoration of the Black Sea Initiative if they decided to revive the initiative?
Yeah, I can't comment on the damage to the port. This is I can't comment on that. All I can say is that port is critical civilian infrastructure. It's required for providing grains to the global south. And yes, let's see what happens. But I can't comment on the extent of the damage.
Thanks. Margaret Bashir?
Hi, Ms. Brown. It's Margaret from Voice of America. Could you just give us a little update on how the situation is for the residents around the Kakhovka Dam? Have people gone back to their homes? Have the waters receded? What the story is there? And also, what's the situation of cooperation from Russia in the areas under their occupation? Because they hadn't been letting you in to deliver aid. So have you had any progress on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, water has receded, but homes have been completely damaged or destroyed by that water. Apartment blocks as well. But I spent a week down there just after the dam was destroyed, and you had people remaining on top floors but had to evacuate lower floors. So that's one thing is housing. So we have, through our humanitarian structure, sent what we call our shelter cluster, which is our shelter experts, down to look at a number of these sites with the local authorities to see, frankly, what we can do together before the winter, right? This is actually, you have a problem of people who've lost their homes, and on top of that, we have the problem of in a couple of months, it's going to be really cold, and what can we do together before the winter months set in? That is a huge problem. The second is drinkable water in places like Nikopol. And so again, we've been doing assessments to these areas to follow up on, what was an immediate response of bringing bottled water, then trucking in water. Now it's is it possible to dig boreholes, essentially wells? People have lost in these places access to drinkable water. So we need some longer term solutions there, which we're also looking at. But on top of that is the damage to the agricultural land, either because of contamination or because irrigation systems have been destroyed. We are working with the government on what we call a post-disaster needs assessment, which will give us a much better idea. There are some pieces of information already out there by, for instance, the Ministry of Environment, but we're looking at it holistically. And that report, it's a government report with our support, the support of the EU and the World Bank, should be ready in a couple of weeks and will give us a much, much better idea. So I think it's fair to say that acute needs managed, longer term needs very large. And we're trying to look at the scale of that. On the access, this is a principle that we continue to advocate for with the Russian Federation, that according to international humanitarian law, we should be able to provide assistance to those people who are very, very close to us. That was the issue around the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. Just crossing that river would have meant that hundreds of people would have immediately received assistance. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do that, as you know, but we continue to work on this. It's a principle.
Thanks. Michelle
Back
Nichols?
to you.
Thank you so much for the briefing, Michelle Nichols from Reuters. The last time we had Martin Griffiths in the room here, he mentioned that the UN had offered to send in an assessment team to have a look at the damaged ammonia pipeline, and that both parties were interested, but obviously it's an active war zone, so it was a little difficult. Just wanted to see if there'd been any sort of developments there or any sign of a team being able to go in and assess the damage there.
Yes, that's a question that needs to be answered at the Secretariat in the headquarters. I'm only dealing with the Ukrainian side, so for that overview, you probably need Martin Griffiths back in the room.
Fair enough. Yes, you in the middle, please.
Thank you, Farhan. This is Lablu Ansar from Bangladesh
Lablu.
Pratidin.
Nice to see you again.
It's my first time here. So I have two questions to you related to...
No. This is for the guest. Sorry, this part is just for the guest.
But it is on human rights situation in
No,
Bangladesh.
Lablu, there will be a separate briefing once the guest has gone, and you can ask me that at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lablu. Okay, yes, Ibtisam Azam.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. I have two questions. First, a follow-up, and I'm not sure if I'm right, but I remember when you were here a few months ago that you said that the humanitarian operation is relatively, compared to other countries, well-funded. I think that was around the end of the year, last year. So my question here is, did this, what changed? Is it that you have more needs, or is it technically that donors are giving less money despite what we hear from countries? And the other question is about weapons and cluster munitions, and to which point they affect your work on the ground, given the fact that we know that the US delivered more of these weapons to the Ukrainians, if it's affect your work at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first, I'd have to say time flies, because actually I haven't been in New York since last October. So that's almost a year. So we were, and that was towards the end of the year. So at the end of 2022, October, we were well-funded, and we finished the year well-funded. So we're still several months away from that. Those needs aren't going away anytime soon. And yeah, my responsibility to advocate for the people of Ukraine who are affected by this war. So I'm hopeful that funding will come. And if I happen to be in New York in October, November, I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to give you a more positive message. And if Martin Griffiths were there, I'm sure he'd tell you that there's, huge needs around the world. Sudan, for instance. So we know that donors are doing their best, but the needs are enormous. But I hope to have better news news for you. On the weapons and cluster munitions, no, I don't have a comment on that at this point in time. Farhan?
But just a follow-up. But is this like affecting your work? To which extent this affects your work on the ground when you are delivering aid?
So all our frontline deliveries are well coordinated, both with the authorities, with the Ukrainian military. So we avoid going into any area where anything may happen. It's true that it can be a couple of kilometers, 2-3 kilometers away from us, but it's not a specific. This is a generalized challenge for us in any of our frontline deliveries, or all of them.
Okay. One more question from Edie.
Ms. Brown, just a couple of figures. In the Kakhovka Dam, how many people remain affected by the dam burst? And in terms of how many people in Ukraine need assistance that you're making this $3.9 billion appeal?
Right. So I think when we have the post-disaster needs assessment that I referred to earlier, we're going to have a much better idea of the scope of the damage, how much it's going to cost to rebuild, and the number of people who are affected in the long term, right? Because, for instance, the agricultural land doesn't necessarily mean that the person who lives on that land had to flee, but it does mean that that person may have contaminated agricultural land or their irrigation systems are completely broken down. So the people, that's the long term, we don't yet have that precise information, but it's coming. On the immediate needs, it was several thousand people who were displaced. Most of them remain displaced because of the water damage to their homes. But it's also true that in those areas, whether it's Kherson or Mykolaiv or Odessa, with the authorities, with the NGOs, there's a very good system of, let me call them reception centers. We call them collective centers here, but reception centers where people are welcomed. And so those immediate needs really have been taken care of. Again, the longer term is a huge problem. Farhan, back to you.
Okay. The total number of people in Ukraine needing assistance. She also asked
excuse
about
me. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's so 17 million, but we're targeting, I think it's 11 to 12 million. That's in our humanitarian response plan. That's online.
Okay, thanks. And one more follow-up from Deji.
Yes, a quick follow-up. You just said that the Russian side still won't let the humanitarian delivery to Russian-controlled areas. Has the Russian side tell you any excuse or concern why they're not doing this? Why they won't allow you to do this?
I think we'll leave that question. This is a very sensitive issue, something we're working on very closely with Martin Griffiths. We continue to advocate for that. Sometimes it's security reasons. Mostly that's what the response is, that they have security concerns. To put it simply.
Thank you. And we have a question from Linda Fasulo.
Thank you. I have a question going back to the $3.9 billion appeal. I was just wondering if you could sort of tell us who are the largest contributors to the appeal so far? And when exactly did it begin? Was it the beginning of the year or more recently?
Yeah, this always starts at the beginning of the year. So it's a calendar plan. We're already starting to build the next one for 2024. So in fact, I launched it in Geneva with Martin Griffiths and Filippo Grande in February at the Palais des Nations. So we have many donors. Some of our biggest contributors: the United States, Germany, ECHO from the Europeans, Canadians, the Japanese, many countries, France, Italy. We have a lot of support from member states.
Okay, great. Thanks. I see no further questions for you. So once more, I'd like to thank our guest, Denise Brown, the Humanitarian Coordinator for Ukraine. Denise, thanks very much.
No problem. Thanks.
Have a great day.